So, welcome everybody to the second episode of this thing that we are not sure what the name of is, which we just call Talking with Cool People right now. And actually, John, I want to get your feedback on this. So we've been tossing because so people call these things vidcasts or
Mhm.
vodcasts, or Blake's entry into the race is Zoomies. And so, what would you call like a video podcast thingy?
I've heard vodcast. Heard blipfert. There's
Lipford.
yeah. So it's
Oh,
sounding very kind of techno. Honestly, it doesn't really matter what you call it. What matters more is the content inside it and whether or not people are interested in it. Which this is a fascinating topic to me. So I find it compelling.
cool. All right. Yeah, we're still playing with words, but right now I'm just going to keep going with talking with cool people. So all of that said, I'm Addison Berry, and I also have Blake Hall from OCO Labs, and I wanted to introduce you to our latest cool person, John Peck. John, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi there. My name is John Peck. I'm the Director of Engineering for the Story Creation team at Business Insider. I've been programming for over 20 years. I have done a variety of roles in both public and private, working first in public education and then switching to private, working for small companies, doing some agency work. Along the way, I started doing video training courses, and throughout my career, I've always had a combination of working on open source software and education and mentoring and collaboration. So happy to talk about my journey and how others can take a similar type of path.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, it's just from our perspective, John's done some work with us, and he's helped do a lot of the technical review on the HeyNode content. Generally, you're awesome to work with. So I'm excited to get the answers to your questions today. So let's just kick it off with the first question, which is, how did you get started using Node originally?
So back in, I think 2015, around there, 2014, 2015, I was doing a lot of PHP work and Drupal specifically. I had been a Zen certified PHP engineer, and I was starting to feel like I was getting a little bit stale. I was looking for other opportunities. I was looking at different types of open source communities and also different types of language, and trying to make sure that I was staying fresh and current. And one of the things that caught my eye was Node.js. It was definitely had a lot of enthusiasm in the ecosystem and had a lot of rapid development and had a lot of excitement. And also it took a much more modular and I would say kind of decoupled approach. And that was kind of missing from PHP, which was kind of a lot of the frameworks that I was familiar with were tending larger and larger and more monolithic and more enterprise. And here's something that is kind of scrappy, and you can build it into something very complex and enterprise ready. But it was also fun and modular. And also the advantage of Node Core, I found, was that it was very small and made a point of not including very many things in it. So you could build it up piece by piece. And so I started just kind of like hello world types of things. I looked at some online content, and so I went on YouTube. I went on lynda.com, which was a company that I've done work for, now LinkedIn Learning. And I was kind of self-taught on it. I had JavaScript skills previously, but it was only from a front-end perspective. So it was adapting some of the similar syntaxes and languages that I was familiar with, but using it in a different context, and also learning way more about, at the time, ES6, which was fresh to me. And it's like, what are these things? And someone said, oh, it's just a fat arrow. I'm like, what the heck is that? And it was a little bit obtuse. And one of the things that helped me was having somebody who could mentor me through the process. The company that I was working for at the time, Four Kitchens, was also interested in professional development and offered me, very graciously offered me an opportunity to do some project work, in the language. So I found took a combination of approaches. Some of it was just self-taught. Some of it was working on, a small project on my own that was just trying to, it was like build a basic REST server and get it to do various things. And, it was, if I recall, it was create a RESTful database that was, I think, interactive fiction games. And it was just, going through, the steps of like, what does it take to do a CRUD operation like this? And then running it through a friend, a mentor, who was deeply familiar with the language and also very current. And so, he provided me with frameworks, suggestions, linting suggestions, stylistic, coding standard selections, and types of things like that, and we treated it like, here's like a full code review. And I'm like, just be brutal and just
Nice.
tell me what I'm doing wrong. And that's how I built up my skills. And then, at the same time, I was applying it at work, and I was transferring those, types of skills and actually building out APIs for a large media company. And it was an effective way of learning. And so it was a multi-tiered approach. And whenever someone asks me, how do you pick up a language? It's, you can just take a class, but having a point at the same time, like, I have a goal. I want to build a thing. This thing does something. And I've chosen this language because I both want to learn it, and I feel that it's a good fit for this project because, so in my case, it's like, well, I need to be doing RESTful APIs for work, so I'm going to build a RESTful API on my own. I like interactive fiction games. There is this database that I can use, scrape the content and then use that as the basis. So it gave me kind of this perfect storm of everything that I needed to motivate myself. Because one of the things that can absolutely stop you from learning a language is not having a reason, not having a justification.
Totally.
Some of the most effective course content that I've found for more formal education courses, such as HeyNode, such as LinkedIn Learning, is having a project that you're working on, as opposed to here's just a bunch of dry information, here, use this function, here's how you do a thing.
Right, like documentation, look it in the docs. It's like,
yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, someone's reading the documentation to me, and that's not particularly interesting. It's like, take me on a journey, solve a particular problem. If I'm interested in it, that will keep me going. So it's, a multifaceted approach.
Yeah, for sure. I get that. What was it like learning Node? And I guess especially compared to other languages, I guess specifically you came from PHP in particular. Was it, because it's really different. So was this did you find it harder or easier or just totally different in terms of being able to pick it up and understand what was going on?
It was different, but I had a formal computer science education. So,
Gotcha.
through that, I was exposed to a number of different languages. My original, the majority of my computer science degree was in Java. But I also had exposure to Perl and Prolog and assembly. So it's like, okay, here's a bunch of different ways of approaching programming. And so I had a harder time with Perl. Wasn't that difficult for me. Prolog was particularly odd for me. Assembly, it took me a while to just kind of get myself over the mental block of how am I doing this? It's and the mental framework I actually put together was you're counting from 0 to 1 very quickly, and once you kind of figure that out, it's it worked for me, and I did well, but it was it's this is not a high level language. It's you have to create the constructs, and once I figured that out, that helped me wrap my brain around it. So going from Java to PHP to Node.js wasn't that much of a stretch, because they are have similar types of C type syntax, And so other than, some of the vocabulary is a little bit different. The vast majority of it, is like, especially when you're doing procedural code, it was very similar. What threw me for a little bit was wrapping my mind around, both callbacks and asynchronous code and getting into that style of programming. So the language itself wasn't necessarily difficult, but the style and doing and wrapping my mind around the event loop, that was, I would say, the most challenging. And now it's very natural, and it's like I get it, and I want other languages to do it this way because because I think I think it can be very elegant, and I like the way that different parts of the program can listen to each other and respond and not block operations. And so that's so it's fun, but it's also that I would say the event loop is an important piece of the puzzle, to break down. And once you kind of like get past that, a lot of it just kind of slides into place.
So how did you, I mean, with that being sort of a challenge, like, how did you figure that out? How did you wrap your head around it? Like, did you just persevere over and over until it clicked? Or did you find somebody explain it in a certain way that it clicked?
So it was, I took an iterative approach. And so it was, again, having a mentor and having someone who can do brutal code reviews helps. So it's like, okay, I did it. It was like, I've completed it with callbacks. And they're like, that's great. Now use promises. What's a promise? Read the manual. Okay. Go back. I was like, all right, cool. Now make it an async await. All right, what's that mean? Okay. And then so it was that, taking that progressive journey. And I think it's important to understand the magic behind syntactic sugar. It's like, right? It's like, it's so easy to throw terms around and obfuscate it and say, it's like, well, you just do this and it just works. And it's like, well, why does it work? And so if you take a bottom up approach and where you start in the most simple way and say, it's like, yeah, you won't be writing code like this, but start off this way so you understand what's going on behind the scenes, and then start adding to that and have, and then, same thing with anonymous functions going to fat arrows. It's like, know the history of the language and why it's working in a particular way. And once you have that kind of framework, things make way more sense than if you learn it from a top down and really have no idea what's happening under the hood.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Cool. Awesome. So I know, so you've mentioned that you've had a mentor and some brutal code review, which is awesome as a resource. But if you don't have access to those, are there any learning resources out there that you used that you thought were particularly good, or that you currently use today if you need to figure something out that you encounter that you're not sure about?
Yeah. I'm a little stale on learning resources right now, but I can talk more
Fair
about
enough.
the approach, so I would be better prepared for that. Also, literally, my bookshelf isn't here right now. I moved relatively recently, so the resources, because it's like, it was a distributed systems with Node.js, and so there's some other tomes that I recommend, but I don't have handy. I should have come prepared for that one. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. But actually,
that,
and if you want later, you can always just shoot me an email, and then I can put that in as a resource in the notes.
I will give you the current list of recommendations, for types of things. But I mean, even just starting off with the good old fashioned JavaScript, the good parts, because at the end of the day, it is JavaScript, and so understanding how JavaScript works is a great place to start. Also, identifying linters and standards, and having I mentioned, brutal code reviews, but some of that is, can be algorithmically enforced. And I don't think that day-to-day code reviews should be brutal. It's like this particular, right. For me, it worked because I knew and liked the person that was doing it, and I told him to do that. For other people, that is not a great learning style. But what I enjoy is getting constant feedback, not only it's like not only negative but positive feedback, and I think that is effective for a lot of people. And linting in particular is an effective technique for checking both the code for syntax errors and problems or logical errors, but also it can be extended to provide best practice recommendations. Linting and style are two different things. So I think it's great to identify a tool such as ESLint, for example, which can be used explicitly for linting and for looking for standard variations, and then using a secondary tool such as Prettier, for example, that you can delegate the responsibility for handling the style. But getting the feedback from the linters with a rule set, and there are a number of rule sets out there. One of the ones that I particularly prefer is the Airbnb JavaScript standard. It isn't necessarily the best one, but it's one of the best documented. And for every rule that is in there, it provides a justification. It's like, this is why. And it's opinionated, but you got to start somewhere. And it gives you, and it gives enough of a framework that it tells you, like ways to succeed. And there's the common JS standard. Google has one as well. It's like there's different options out there. I would say compare and contrast the approaches, but having a linter, understanding like some of the fundamentals, and then branching out towards, then branching out into other types of, educating sources, such as, books that are talking about, how to build systems as opposed to just how to use the language. That for me, that was more effective, but also that's the type of work that I have typically done, is full stack, but mostly back end oriented work. And so I'm interested in the architectural side of it.
Cool. I got one last question, that just to flip back to the whole like JavaScript, the good parts and such. Like, do you think that if somebody is not that familiar with JavaScript, should they just like go and learn JavaScript first and then approach Node, or do you think they can learn them both at the same time?
You can learn both at the same time, but again, it's like, what is your goal? It's like, is the goal I want to learn how to program? Is the goal that I want to make a website? It's like, ask yourself, like, what am I trying to do? It's like, Node.js is a fantastic language. It is not necessarily the best language for all problems. And same with JavaScript. JavaScript is a fantastic language. Other people hate it. For good reasons. Everybody is entitled to their opinions, but if you look at it objectively, it is not always the best tool. It is also, on the pro side, very approachable. If you can, if you have a browser, you can run JavaScript. It's as simple as that. So it has a low barrier of entry. There's also a lot of websites out there like CodePen, for example, that will give you a interactive sandbox and web server kind of like all wrapped into one, where you can create code that will compile into a web server and produce interactive experiences and allow you to, without installing anything locally on your machine, to get up and running. It also kind of depends on the type of workstation you have. If you have a Chromebook, taking that approach would work very well. If you have Windows, you can install Node.js in Windows, and it is a massive pain. I've done it. Yeah, it's funky. You can get it working, and you can be successful, but it's like, I don't know if it's necessarily the best. It's not the environment that I would choose for a day-to-day operation, but you can. It is available on there. It's a lot easier to get up and running on Mac. It's way easier to get it up and running on Linux. So but then that speaks like kind of like the whole conversation about it's like when you start talking about what kind of workstation you have, that's a barrier for entry. So,
Totally.
getting back to like, it's like if you just want to learn JavaScript, you can do that, with very little friction. If you want to, learn Node.js, you have to think a little bit more about, what type of environment you want to work in, and what your tooling may be. And I'm a little behind on Chromebook development. It's very possible that there's probably some type of like Node.js sandbox environment that is available on a Chromebook. Do your research. I honestly, I'm not sure, but the point being is like ask yourself, why do I want to learn this particular language, and what am I going to be using it for?
Yep, totally makes sense. Very good advice. And I think that's a step that a lot of people forget. They're like, "Oh, shiny," and shiny isn't really a good enough reason. Typically, I would say.
There's there's jobs out there in a lot of different languages. It's like if someone were asked me today, like, what language should I, do you want to learn next? I'd say Golang. It's like that's cool. It's like it's also stylistically a very different type of programming. It's functional programming, and it's like it forces me to think in very different ways, but I also see it in enterprise context being used very effectively, and it's like that looks like fun. But I haven't started it because I don't have a particular project that needs it. So it's like kind of like if I was to learn a thing, yeah, that'd be cool. Another one I've thought about is like just going back and learning C++ or C# and writing a roguelike, and old school text adventure, dungeon crawler type of game. And, and that would be my motivating factor was, it's like, I have this particular project, and why would I want to learn that particular language? It's like, well, I could use JavaScript to do it, but it's like, it isn't necessarily the most efficient way to do it. So.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. We'll go ahead and wrap this up, but it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time and hopping on to chat with us. And I'm sure we'll be seeing you, running into you again in the future. And have a great week.
Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity, and best of luck to you and yours. Stay safe, stay awesome.
Thanks. Awesome.